Welcome back, everybody, and more importantly, welcome to November. That wonderful time of year when we talk about animated movies and TV. Today's topic is a blast from the past, CyberSix. Isn't that right, Nigel? Nigel? Oh, stop pouting.
Why aren't we talking about Dragon Ball?
We can't cover Dragon Ball every year, dude. We did one last year. Doing another one just make it seem repetitive.
I don't see the issue. We have only been at this for 2 years. Covering another won't hurt, and it's topical right now since Sparking Zero just released.
Oh, I'm aware. You've been glued to the screen ever since it dropped. Wrestling the keyboard away from you wasn't how I wanted to start working on this video.
Why a show like CyberSix anyway? I thought you were going to do Outlaw Star.
Well, I was thinking about it, but everybody and their mom's already got an Outlaw Star video out there anyway. I didn't think there was anything I could add to it.
Everyone and their mum, huh?
Well, yeah.
Well, our mother is right over there. Why don't you ask her if she has heard about Outlaw Star?
It was a joke, Nigel. And plus, I really don't want to bug her. She looks busy.
I won't annoy you about Dragon Ball for a while.
A few moments later.
Hey, Ma, have you ever heard of Outlaw Star?
What the heck is an outlaw star? Are you two in some kind of trouble? Both of my babies are wrapped up in some kind of gang.
No. It's not a gang. It's not a drug. It's a TV show.
Then no, I never heard of it.
A few moments later.
Well, that was painful.
Why did you say we? You know she was going to think I'm involved.
I couldn't help it. It was an accident.
Yes, you were an accident.
Was not.
Was too.
Was not.
Was too.
Was not.
Enough! If you all don't stop arguing, my foot's going to find both of your asses. Now both of you go to your rooms and stay there until I say otherwise.
You are aware we are full-grown adults.
3 days later.
Parents, no matter how old you get, they always make you feel like a child. Which leads to my next point, childhood. A critical time when young people reach out to watch and play whatever TV show, movie, or game they can possibly get their hands on to develop their taste in entertainment. Anime being one of those forms of media. Ask any random otaku or convention crawler, when did they first see anime? 9 out of 10 times they will answer when they were a kid. And with more people being drawn to the medium every year, made even easier with streaming, a simple punch of a button and boom, you're watching anime. It wasn't that way when I was growing up. Oh no. As a teenager, I had to wait for anime blocks on Cartoon Network like Toonami and Adult Swim to catch my favorite shows, and liquid television on MTV to a certain extent. Before that, in the 90s, pickings were kind of sparse. If you didn't go to the video store and pick up the DVDs, which were overly expensive, you were stuck with watching whatever was on the TV. Mine was FoxKids. Nothing against the block, it had some all-time greats like Digimon, the first couple seasons of Dragon Ball, Digimon, Monster Rancher, Digimon, Escaflowne, Shaman King, and Digimon. Yeah, pickings were really sparse back then. Even more so if you weren't a fan of Digimon, like myself. But that was Fox trying to copy Warner Brothers' success with Pokemon. I can't blame them. Digimon was the most successful IP on the network, so them carrying it on and letting other shows fall to the wayside, that's just them chasing the carrot. However, I will give credit. They did take risks, like the aforementioned Escaflowne. And today's topic, CyberSix. A 13-episode series produced by NOAA, Network of Animation out of Vancouver, based on the comic out of Argentina.
We gave up Dragon Ball for this. This isn't even anime.
Okay, what for you classifies something as anime?
Well, I guess animation created by Japan.
Well, by that logic, then the Ghostbusters cartoon back in the 90s is anime, since all the animation was created by Japan, just like this show. The animation was directed and drawn out of Japan.
Okay, fine. How about the source material? CyberSix's source material, like you said, is from Argentina. Anime is based on source material originating from Japan. Shows like Gundam, Ninja Scroll, Demon Slayer, and Cowboy Bebop all come from Japanese storytellers. Game, set, and match.
Is that the hill you want to die on?
I just won the argument.
Well, then by that metric, Dragon Ball isn't anime then.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I hate to break it to you, dude, but Dragon Ball source material does not originate from Japan. It comes from China, specifically the novel Journey to the West, written by 16th century novelist Wu Qinyin. It's no doubt that Dragon Ball is Akira Toriyama's baby and is his unique spin on the tale, but at the end of the day, the source material is very much not Japanese. So, game, set, and match, huh? You smell that? It smells like victory. My prize? You sit down and shut up. Anyway, back to topic. CyberSix is a 13-episode series centering around the character CyberSix, a gynoid on the run from a mad scientist named von Richter.
What is a gynoid?
I thought you were going to be quiet.
It's an earnest question some of your audience will be asking, so just answer the bloody question.
Alright, fine. A gynoid is a term for a female android, like for example a female replicant from Blade Runner. But in this case she's designed for combat with superhuman strength, reflexes, yada yada yada. So more like Roy and less like Rachel. And in fact she shares more in common than a description with Roy. Yep, she's on borrowed time, but unlike Roy, she can stave off her degradation by drinking substance left behind the enemy bioroids also created by von Richter. The lunatic didn't just create Six. Oh no, he created a whole line of monsters and artificial beings, ranging from robots and super animals like jaguars and bluebirds to mythical creatures like goblins and werewolves. I repeat, goblins and werewolves. Can't say the madman didn't have an open mind about experimentation. But it's not just monster slaying though. When CyberSix isn't moonlighting as a vigilante, she's cosplaying as a teacher, Adrián Seidelman, working alongside her best friend Lucas. And that's the summed up version anyway. It's a bit more complex. You see, she is cross-dressing as a man, whipping her hair back and wearing glasses like another superhero, wearing baggy clothes to hide her physique. There's also added drama of a love triangle between Lucas, Six, and Adrián. Yeah, a love triangle involving only two people. It's just a spin on the Clark Kent and Lois Lane formula. Lucas has the hots for Six and helps her after dark with her whole vigilante thing. Later in the series, realize Adrián and Six are connected behind the scenes, believing the two are item, completely unaware that Six and Adrián are just the same person. Crazy love triangles aside, if you think about it, it's a pretty clever disguise. When the bad guys and the cops are looking for a hot superhuman babe clad in skin-tight leather, the last person you're going to suspect is a dweeby teacher who recites poetry in a rundown school. There is a little more to why she's disguised as a dude. It doesn't come into the show, but it gets fleshed out in the comic. But I'll get into the differences between the comic and the show in a few minutes. That's a different hill to climb. Now, the bad guy von Richter in the show is your typical evil scientist, making minions to do his bidding and monsters to terrorize the population centers, aiming for world domination. But you really don't see him in person until the series finale at the end of the show. Most of his matters are handled through the pint-sized clone Jose.
Jose?
I'm Jose. In the future, you will sit in my presence.
Jose, in the show at least, is supposed to be a genius but lacks any kind of maturity to get anything done right, so he fumbles every job he goes on. Now, CyberSix herself is unique, the only surviving member of the Cyber series. In the show, she did have a brother, Cyber 29, but right before her departure from the lab, 29 suffered a near-fatal accident, surviving solely through von Richter's interference, where he becomes a Panther, Data 7. I did say this show was weird, right? It's hinted that the doctor swapped out the Panther's brain for 29, making him Data 7. 7 starts off as an antagonist to 6 because of Richter's brainwashing, but he comes to his senses and joins 6's fight against evil. Even though the series doesn't explain the classifications of the creatures created through the series, all the experiments fall into separate project series. 6 and 29 were part of the Cyber series, flawless superhumans that could pass for regular humans. 29, now Data 7, is part of the Data series, more animalistic projects. The Technos, which are just straight up machines. You got the mutants, which are just juiced up thugs, all brawn, no brain. And finally, the highlights of the show, the more one-off monsters that don't really fall into any category, called Fixed Ideas, which I kind of like. I just wish it was a little bit more explored in the show. As you watch the show, it's clear there's homages from other shows and comic books inserted here and there. Not just the Superman stuff, but Batman too. The most obvious is Batman the Animated Series, and Frank Miller's works too, more precisely The Dark Knight Returns. I mean, just check out this panel. And to some extent, Todd McFarlane's Spawn as well. I mean, just check out the capes. And I don't know if it's irony or fate. Both comics were adapted to animation after this, so maybe Six got the ball rolling? I don't know, maybe. Even with all the homages to other comic books and shows, CyberSix is very unique, with the city of Meridiana combining elements of cities from South America and Eastern Europe, with the giant angel statue parked smack dab in the middle of the city. It's one of the biggest landmarks seen throughout the series, but it magically disappears when you get a wide shot of the city, so where did it go? Someone move it? Disappearing statues aside, CyberSix does have a really good look. It looks like the studio tried to bring out some of the comic book, but smooth out some things and make it more streamlined. Nothing against it, it actually helps with a lot of the animation too. The fights look like they have a lot of inertia to them. Nothing looks sticky or staticky. I caught a few spots where animation was reused, not enough to complain about it. It's mainly just reused once or twice. And on whole, this whole show looks amazing, so I can't knock it really. But this is the part of the show where I talk about the bad things. I do have quite a few really, but most of my complaints do come back to the same problem. There's not enough of this show. There really needs to be more. 13 episodes isn't enough for a show like this. Just when the show starts ramping up, it ends. They squeeze a hell of a lot into 13 episodes, but some of the plot lines, like Six needing the green vials to stave off her degradation, it falls by the wayside until the last 2 episodes. And it also suffers from Monster of the Day syndrome, where each episode introduces a new monster just to get killed off at the end and introduce a new monster next week. Nothing against it. I mean, Power Rangers have been doing it for years. Another thing is the second to last episode. It felt way bigger than what we got. It opens up in the middle of a fight between Six and Griselda, a fixed idea with abilities similar to Six, except she can cloak and has a wrist blade. I wonder where that came from. It's not the episode itself I have a problem with, it's actually one of my favorites. Six being hunted by Griselda while she's starting to degrade in the middle of a school field trip gives it a lot of tension for a show like this. The problem is that it feels like a second part of a 2-part episode. Griselda's intro and the beginning of Six's accelerated degradation, it's all missing. My guess is the showrunners could only get approved for 13 episodes, and they had to make cuts, squeezing what they could out of every episode. It does feel like that. Each episode has at least one plot element that moves the story along. Nothing feels like filler, except for one. Yashimoto Private Eye. An episode that focuses on the private investigator, Yashimoto, hired by Jose to locate CyberSix's hideout. Yashimoto turns down the job, but he gets forced into taking it due to Jose kidnapping his younger sister, Ikkyo, and the reoccurring character, Julian, a street urchin who's friends with CyberSix. The episode goes how you expect it, with Yashimoto actually siding with Six to take on Jose to get his sister back, kicking Jose's ass, beating the monster, and the day is saved. A straight up filler episode, because these two characters never show up again. I guess you could say it's a Julian episode, but there's no character growth for Julian. In fact, there's no character growth for any of the main characters. It's just these two. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I feel like they could have cut this episode, made way for a more important episode. It also doesn't help that Yashimoto's character designs is awkward. Small slanted eyes with buck teeth, and Ikkyo's wearing a traditional kimono for everyday wear. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm getting serious breakfast at Tiffany's flashbacks. The strange is the episode's art was directed, drawn, and approved in Japan, so at the end of the day, they did it. I looked at the original character design. It's bad too, but it was made worse by Japan, ironically. If they were drawing something specific to get out of this, I don't guess it, but at the end of the day, they approved it, so case closed and dropped. Still awkward, and at the end of the day, you can skip this episode since there's nothing that really ties it to the main plot or moves it along. It's just a filler episode, so you get 12. And then you have the ending. If you're not a fan of ambiguous endings, like if somebody who's important to the plot being up in the air, whether they live or die at the end of the show, this will drive you up a wall. So if you don't want spoilers, then please jump to here, because I'm going to spoil the crap out of the final episode. This is your only warning. The last episode has a giant fixed idea in the shape of a sea monster, which will detonate once it gets to the center of the city, in a last-ditch effort to kill CyberSix. Von Reichter parked in the lab outside the city to see the fireworks. CyberSix and Data 7 see their one and only opportunity to infiltrate the lab, confront Reichter, and settle things once and for all. But before that, Reichter and Jose have a falling out, Jose diverting the monster toward the lab instead of the city, making his escape right before it gets there. Von Reichter, aware of Six's degradation, offers to cure it if she decides to come back and serve him again. She turns him down, of course, and before she can knock his block off, all of his creations turn on him and the show cuts away before his grisly death. Meaning that's the end of the show, right? Well, you still remember that monster outside? Six and Data 7 make it to the door right as the monster goes off, with no clear indication whether they got out or not. The only clue, her light on in her apartment as Lucas goes up to see if it's her. We cut to Jose with one final wink at the camera, and end. That's the end of the show. I had to wait 10 years to see that ending, since Fox only aired 10 of the 13 episodes. You see, Fox had this knack of putting on shows and then axing them off right as they're getting good, just to make way for another show they'll probably axe off to later down the road. So after all these years, I finally get to watch the show. I had to get it on DVD, by the way, and I get this ending. An ending that just absolutely drives you up a wall. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. How did the comic book resolve the ending? Well, I guess it's that time where I started addressing the differences between the comic and the show. And oh boy, this is going to be a spicy one. Straight up for one, the tone. The comic book has a more sexualized tone. That black bar is there for a reason. The comic is clearly aimed for a more mature audience, while the show was aimed for a general audience. For example, instead of CyberSix getting her substance from a neatly packed vial left behind her kills, Six in the comic book, she just straight up sucks it right out of her neck like she's a goddamn vampire. That flowing cape and night owl routine makes a whole lot of sense now. Certain characters are nothing like their show counterparts. Von Richter, for example, he's a straight up Gestapo scientist from World War II. Another example is a reoccurring character named Lori. In the show, she's a street punk with a knack for hacking computers and has a crush on Adrian. In the comic, however, she's a bit older and, how can I say this? She's been around the block a couple of times. Instead of a computer savvy punk, she's a circus performer that has no issue propositioning men to bump ugly. Now, Jose is mostly the same for a few exceptions. He's still the same immature narcissist, but instead of being a de-aged Von Richter, he is a perfect clone of the man in a child's body. He is a literal man-child. The added disturbance is Von Richter decided to give him an increased libido. So he can't compete with Richter as an equal intellectually because he's constantly thinking about, well, boobs. Imagine if Master Roshi was put into the child of a mad scientist. That's basically what he is. Now, Lucas and Six, on the other hand, are pretty much the same. The only real difference is that Six is she's a little bit more grizzled in the comic book, coming off as more of a noir aspect. You know, having that inner speech bubble and monologue and stuff like that. It kind of goes into that way into the show, but it kind of falls to the wayside. Now, Lucas, on the other hand, he's pretty much the same, except instead of being obsessed with football, he's a conspiracy nut. No real difference, really. It takes the same amount of devotion, though I think the football fan would be a little bit more radical. Other than that, they're mostly the same. Now, one of the elements in the comic book that's kind of irritating is the constant need to spoon-feed the audience every detail. There is zero room for subtlety in the comic book, but some of it is appreciated, however. It goes into the backstory of how Six got her alternate identity, which the show doesn't. You see, after the escape of the lab, before making it to the city, she came across a horrible accident involving a family of 3. A mom, dad, and a little boy. The boy was the same age as Six when she escaped, and she also looked like him. So she needed a cover story, so she just assumed his identity and moved into the city, living off his name. Kinda gruesome, but explains an important part of Six's character the show didn't. So points granted. But how did the comic resolve the ending? Well, funny enough, just like the show, the comic was canceled and the ending had to be rushed. And its ending is, for lack of a better word, batshit crazy. I only read a little bit of it, and once they got far enough to see how they ended, I just quit. The ending involves Von Richter attempting to clone Jesus. Yes, that Jesus. The mad scientist tries to clone Jesus Christ so he may become the father of Christ. What? What the fuck? The clear, blunt nature of the comic makes the subtlety of the series a much easier watch. And so if I had to recommend, I'm going to recommend the TV show every time. Yeah, it sucks it's so short, but the booking in nature and the ambiguous nature of the final episode makes it a lot easier to swallow than that batshit crazy ending the comic had. But I do have to admit, it's not an anime. This is an action cartoon like Batman the Animated Series or Spawn TV show. Yes, you're right, Nigel, don't say it, because at the end of the day, you were still wrong. Regardless on whether you consider it an anime or not, I still recommend it. If you're a fan of animation from that era or action cartoons in general, give it a watch. You'll be pleasantly surprised. And with the dialed-back nature of the show, I can see this appealing to a wide variety of people, like preteens, teens, and adults. So give it a try and thank me later. Close out, Nigel.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please tap the thumbs up button. If you want to stay up to date with the channel, subscribe and ring the notification bell. If there is an issue, please leave a comment. But be warned, Grouch has been known to print out the negative comments on toilet paper. I swear that must be a health risk, but he never pays me any mind anyway.